My name is Keith Anderson. I am a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I started training 2007 was when I originally started training. Took a lot of time off. Recently got back into it. After some prodding from some of my friends, I've decided to open my own jiu-jitsu club. We're going small and kind of intimate at the beginning. I have 250 square feet of mat that just came in from Fuji. Roll out mats in my basement. My wife and I recently moved into a house, so that kind of opened up the opportunity to get something started. I'm looking forward to having some friends of mine come in hopefully soon and see how everything goes, see what the interest level is, and I think I bring a high level of coaching to a sport that needs more high level coaches. One of the major concerns about how most jiu-jitsu gyms, it comes down to how they run their class is the current issue. So most of them do a 3-part series kind of thing where the first, say there's an hour-long class, the first third is going to be warm-ups, which most of the time have nothing or very little to do specifically with jiu-jitsu. They don't teach body mechanics, they don't teach anything that actually works on the mat in a pressure situation. Then the second third of their class is the coach bumping their gums and speaking to excess about how to explain 1 to 3 moves. A lot of times there's something about threes that appeals to people, so they'll do 3 moves. Typically these moves have 7, 8, 10, 12 parts depending on how granular you want to get with explaining it, and that takes a lot of time and people aren't able to retain that and able to hold on to it. When it comes to physical sports, we learn better by doing. Actually, a lot of things we learn better by doing, getting our hands on, actually making mistakes and fixing the errors in real time, as opposed to having things explained to us. One thing when it comes to, I don't remember who did the quote, but they brought up that a man never walks through the same river twice because he is not the same man and the river is not the same river. This is true of jiu-jitsu. If I teach somebody commonly known like an arm bar, here's the perfect arm bar. And I actually tried to develop a methodology to coach a perfect arm bar, and it was always changing. I get new information. It's like, oh, not quite, not quite. It's never going to be perfect because the person I'm doing it on, their size is going to vary, their weight is going to vary, so those things change. Their mechanics, their limb length changes versus my limb length. So there's no such thing as a perfect arm bar. I am never going to do an arm bar the same way. So I look more to a methodology of teaching what are the important factors, what makes an arm bar an arm bar. People who are into philosophy might look at like Platonic ideals. So what do you have to do to make an arm bar work? Once you know to control the shoulder and control the wrist and attack the joint in between, now you can start finding arm bars all over the place. And you just focus on those mechanics, and then what works is what works. So that's a variation of ecological dynamics. That's what I'm looking into more, to teach from that methodology, and it becomes a lot more playful. We have a tendency to teach, we lose when we start teaching adults. We think the adults learn different than kids, and we know from language that that's not true. They'll tell you that kids learn language a lot faster than adults. And to an extent, this is true and will always remain true due to neuroplasticity. However, if we look at how adults are taught language in school, very structured, very regimented, that A, B, C, D, grammar, this, that, the other, spelling, all these other things, versus how kids are taught, kids learn in their environment. The words are, it's like, what is that? What is that? What is that? Okay, you start learning the words, you start learning how everything plays together. So the spoken language is what's important. If you teach adults the way you teach children in the environment, they learn far more rapidly. One of my major concerns with jiu-jitsu in general is despite what anyone will tell you about ego, and it breaks the ego, some of the most egotistical people I've ever met are jiu-jitsu coaches. They want all the focus on them. I am the holder of all the knowledge. No, you're not. You're not the holder of all the knowledge. You can help people to a certain extent, but you're not a holder of all the knowledge. And I think getting over that factor is important. Coaches will extend the promotion period. People will brag about how jiu-jitsu takes 10 years. My question is why? Why does it take 10 years to get a black belt? If I can't make it faster, then whoever my student, if I can't get them to my level faster than I got there, I feel I'm doing something wrong as a coach. I need to find ways to make shortcuts, make things more efficient. They shouldn't have to suffer what I suffered. Not that it's necessarily a suffer. So my job as a coach is to find out increasingly better ways to get somebody to where they want to be. All a belt does is hold my pants up out in the real world or hold my gi closed on the mats. There used to only be the white and black belt. White was for beginners, and then you keep the beginner mentality and you go all the way through black belt. That was with judo. Jiu-jitsu adopted a belt system that was more expanded. I think belts are actually important. I think it's important to have things to strive for, things that motivate you to continue your pursuit of excellence. So what you're doing is basically taking a large goal and breaking it down into smaller goals. And anyone who studies psychology knows that if you want to get things done, if you want to get a large project done, you don't look at the large project and go, oh man, it's going to take me like 5 years to get that done. No. What's the step that you can take now? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. That's Lao Tzu. It's very true. It's true in jiu-jitsu. So I think you can take it too far. And we have 4 stripes per belt for adults. Kids, they've expanded that out so that kids could get promoted up through sometimes a longer timeline since they're not allowed to get beyond blue belt until 16. So there's certain rules on that. My perspective of the belts, I really like Saulo Ribeiro. He wrote Jiu-Jitsu University, and he has a focus for each belt. And for white belt, your job is to survive. That's it. Make the upper belts struggle to submit you. If you do that, you're winning. You're doing a great job as a white belt. The harder you can make their life. This doesn't mean that you don't learn submissions, you don't learn your self-defense, you don't learn escapes, you don't learn all of that stuff. But the focus for that entire belt should be maximizing my survival. Not my offense, but my defense. Then moving into blue belt is escapes. Now that I've survived and I make it so you can't submit me, you can't beat me, now I need to learn how to get into a better position. Jiu-jitsu is all about positions. So I want to improve my position by compromising your position. Mine gets better, yours gets worse. So blue belt is when you start focusing on that. Now you'll have learned escapes in white belt, you damn sure better have. But blue belt is where you start having that focus. Purple belt comes around. Now you start developing your own game. This is that level. A lot of people will say, once you've reached purple belt, you're just a black belt that hasn't been on the mats enough. You have a lot of the knowledge. You have a lot to share with everybody else. That's the level that I'm at now. So it's not about your ability to necessarily benefit your teammates, but your focus on the mats now becomes having a guard that you shall not pass. I keep people from being able to get around my guard. That's my primary goal as a purple belt. And this is why purple belts, not for anyone who's not in the sport, these words are going to be meaningless, but they start like inverting and doing all this wild stuff. And that's common at that level because that's where their focus needs to be, is retaining their guard, which is what jiu-jitsu is known for. Moving on to brown belt, you start learning how to pass that guard. How do I get around that person's guard so I can get to a more dominant position? Then you reach black belt. Black belt's supposed to be just the beginning. You should have a mentality of like, yes, I got a black belt, but things are only starting. They're only beginning. Your focus at black belt now is attack. Submit, submit, submit. One other thing that changes along this path is on one end of the spectrum, when you're at the white belt level, the focus needs to be more on concepts. Once you get to black belt level, it starts to turn more into techniques. That's where the refinement happens. That's where you start getting into the more specifics. But with white belt, it needs to be basic concepts. Occupy the space between the armpit and the hip. That's a priority. I can create an entire game around that to keep a white belt practicing and learning without going into techniques, just by saying, hey, I need you to get from wherever you're at now to occupying this space. If you get there, you win. If you don't, you lose. I want to designate a winner. That's another concept that I've added into my coaching, is one person will be told you're going to be the winner. So if the person's job is to occupy that space and I am their opponent, I am their training partner, they will work to occupy that space. I will give resistance. but only enough resistance to make it difficult, but not impossible. And I can up that resistance based on how skilled that they are. So it's a constantly dynamic, changing aspect to the training. So there's always an opportunity to learn. There's always an opportunity to get better, no matter who you're rolling with, who you're developing with. But yeah, those are the focuses from white through to black. Primarily see them as motivating factors. I think promotions, I think it's important to be transparent about promotions. That's one thing that I will push forward is here are the things that will get you from white belt to your first stripe to your second stripe, moving on until you get your blue belt, purple belt, so on and so forth. I think being as transparent as possible is very important. That way, you shouldn't, if you're in a job, you should have an idea if you're gonna get a promotion before the boss calls you in. If you're in jiu-jitsu, you should have an idea that I'm due a promotion before the coach pulls you. It should never be coming as a surprise. There should be enough line of communication between the coach and the student that says, hey, this is what's gonna happen. This is what I need out of you. This is what I'm seeing. One thing that's an old school mentality is never ask your coach about when you're gonna get promoted. Otherwise, he's gonna tack on an ear. That coach is an asshole, period. All stop. That's the ego I'm talking about. That's the arrogance. That's the I am the center of all things. That's not the case. Jiu-jitsu as a coach, I am paid to coach my students. I work for them at the end of the day. My food on my table, roof over my head comes because students come to me to learn. I work for them. And you need to keep that in mind as a coach. And I think a lot of coaches lose that as they climb up the ranks and they forget what it was like to be somebody lower down. These are, when we're talking about adults specifically, a lot of them, they have careers. They're teachers, they're doctors, they're firefighters. They're not somebody who is just a child to be dictated to. So I think that's very important to make sure that you're remembering who is supposed to be of service and who you're supposed to be of service to. And part of that is being transparent and being open and being honest with the student and saying, hey, if I was a boss on a job, it is perfectly reasonable for me to tell an employee, and I don't want anyone to mistake that as the mentality, but I can tell an employee and say that I'm wanting to help grow and I'm wanting to improve and say, hey, you have an issue over here, but you do great over here. Same conversation. Coaches need to be having that more often. That way students are never surprised. I think a basic structure of time is not unreasonable, just to give a coach kind of an idea of when they need to be looking more at a student. There's relative number of hours to get to promotion. Now you can figure off of what has been the standard, which I think is too slow. So maybe adopt a standard of your own. That's something I'm still working through on specifics of time, but we'll say 20 hours of mat time. I'm gonna start looking at somebody for a stripe in their white belt. I'm gonna start focusing more and say, okay, I need to pay attention in class to what this person's doing at that point and make sure they're not missing anything, because again, it's my job to tell them, hey, you're coming up on getting ready for your next stripe. I think you're getting where you earned it in this way, and this way, but I'm still missing this, and this. If you're a purple belt and your guard game sucks, based on the things I've just said, we're gonna have to look at that and work on that, and I need to help you before I can give you a brown belt. Obviously, I'm a purple belt, I can't give a brown belt, but I can go to my black belt and ask them, say, hey, this person's ready, this person's not ready. Those are the criteria I'm gonna be using to talk to my black belt in order to give any ranks above what I'm allowed to give. Transparent, honest, straightforward, that allows people to progress. They know what they need to do. They have goals and targets of what to reach. It should never be, I think he deserves this, because people get left behind. They start to feel bitter. They start to feel upset, deservedly so. Why is that person getting promoted? At the end of the day, they need to be reminded to compare yourself to yourself yesterday, not to anybody else. But it happens too often for it to not be a problem that needs to be addressed. Number one that is important to me is a sense of being welcomed. I see jiu-jitsu is far more important. A lot of people join jiu-jitsu for a multitude of reasons. For a long time, self-defense has been the priority when it comes to marketing and why you should do jiu-jitsu, self-defense. The reality is especially for adults, we don't get into fights on the street. This is not a common thing. It might happen, especially some of the tough guys out there in their head where they're like, oh, in this situation I do this, or in this situation I do that. But the reality is most of the violence, if we're going to face violence, we're going to face it as children in school from other children. Once we've graduated school, typically the rate for which we'll face violence goes way down. So the priority for me needs to be learning skills that are useful in life in general, fitness, and number one is a sense of belonging. I think that's why a lot of people now seek out sports like jiu-jitsu. They also seek out things like CrossFit. It's not so much about what you're doing, that's important, but who you're doing it with. So the number one thing that they can expect is to be welcomed, talked to, and appreciated for being there. It's a great frustration to me when I hear a white belt say something like, I don't want to waste their time when talking about working with an upper belt. That's absolutely unacceptable cultural thread that runs through far too many gyms, is this idea that, oh, well, they're an upper belt, I'm taking away from them, I'm wasting their time. No, we're a team. We get better together. Steel sharpens steel. It's said all the time, but a lot of times it's this tough guy mentality, like the toughest, gotta work with the toughest. No, you should be able to get things out of any training partner you work with, especially if you're a quality upper belt. You should be able to find a way to gain from working with them. Teaching is often the best way to learn anything. I'm a huge proponent of teaching. I'm a huge proponent of people being encouraged to participate. You will be encouraged to participate immediately, right away. Now, that's okay if you're shy, and we'll work on that. But I want you to feel welcome. That's the number one thing. There's no, class is gonna change from time to time to time. I don't run a fundamentals class. You get a whole bunch of white belts working together. A lot of times it's the blind leading the blind. Nobody knows anything. It's much better to try to integrate new people in with higher level people, and you just structure it where you play games and you have various limitations on what the higher belt is able to do. And then you just have things, this is more specific for people who know jiu-jitsu, but you teach them to chase the back. I want you to get chest to back pressure, chest to back. That's it. Somebody right off the street can understand that, and it can be explained to them as why. It's like, this is the start of developing a dominant position. We're gonna play this game. Maybe this day we're working something else. So it's moving from a guard position. You explain the basic fundamentals of guard, and we're gonna work passes. I need you to get from that position to this position. How you do it? Play, have fun. It doesn't have to be super specific. A coach should not be dictating how things are done. It should not be a lecture. Nobody likes lectures. They don't want to be lectured to. It should be educational. It should be games. It should be fun. It should be playful. So expect to have fun. Expect to have a good time. Expect to have a workout. Those are all things that should be happening in every class. But the number one, the biggest, most important thing for me is expect a culture of welcome. We want you. Jiu-jitsu it isn't for everybody, but it can be for everybody. And it's very important to have a gym culture that makes it approachable for as many people as possible. I'm a big proponent of people having a chance to try things. That lays into that transparency. I want you to know what you get before I start asking you for money or anything else. So we do 7-day free trial. And then if you recommend and bring other people for their first class, we'll add another 7 days for you.